The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the vast expanse of the Sonoran Desert. As rancher Wade Coleman rode the boundaries of his sprawling cattle operation, it was October 1889, and the heat still shimmered off the rocky ground like liquid fire, making mirages dance on the horizon. Wade had been riding alone for 3 hours, checking water holes and counting cattle, when he spotted something that shouldn't have been there. A small figure sat motionless beside a dried creek bed. Hunched over like a discarded scarecrow, Wade spurred his horse toward the shape, his weathered face creasing with concern. As he drew closer, he realized it was a child, a boy no older than 10. Sitting in the meager shade of a dying mesquite tree, the boy didn't look up as Wade approached, didn't even seem to notice the sound of hoof beats on the hard-packed earth. His clothes were torn and dusty, his dark hair matted with dirt and sweat. Most alarming of all, his thin frame showed clear signs of starvation and dehydration. "Hey there, son," Wade called out, dismounting and approaching slowly. "You all right?" The boy finally raised his head, revealing hollow eyes that held far too much pain for someone so young. His lips were cracked and bleeding, and when he tried to speak, only a hoarse whisper emerged. "Please, mister," he managed to croak. "Help me." Wade immediately uncapped his canteen and knelt beside the boy, supporting his head as he gave him small sips of precious water. "Easy now. Take it slow. Too much too fast will make you sick." As the boy drank, Wade noticed he was clutching something against his chest with desperate determination. It was an envelope, creased and stained but carefully protected despite the boy's obvious ordeal. "What's your name, son?" Wade asked gently, settling beside the child in the shade. "Timothy." The boy whispered. "Timothy Walsh. I've been walking for days, trying to find someone who could help. They said you were an honest man, Mr. Coleman." Wade was surprised the boy knew his name, but more concerned about getting him to safety. "How do you know who I am, Timothy, and where did you come from?" Timothy's grip on the letter tightened. "I came from the Riverside Children's Home in Phoenix. But it's not a home, mister. It's a terrible place where bad things happen to kids who don't have anybody to protect them." Wade felt a chill despite the desert heat. He had heard rumors about the conditions at some of the territory's orphanages, but seeing this starving child brought those whispers into stark reality. "Who told you to find me?" Wade asked, helping Timothy to his feet. "My friend Billy did, before they took him away," Timothy said, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his cheeks. "Billy said Judge Harrison was coming to visit the orphanage, and anyone who complained or caused trouble would be sent to work in the mines where they'd never come back. Billy tried to warn the other kids, but the judge's men caught him." Wade's blood ran cold at the mention of Judge Silas Harrison. The man was one of the most powerful figures in Arizona territory, known for his harsh sentences and rumored connections to several mining operations that used questionable labor practices. "Billy gave me this letter before they dragged him away," Timothy continued, holding up the stained envelope. "He made me promise to get it to someone honest, someone who wasn't afraid of the judge. He said it had proof of all the terrible things happening at the orphanage." Wade studied the boy's face, seeing truth in his desperate eyes. "Timothy, how long have you been walking?" "For days," Timothy replied. "I only had the water Billy gave me, and I ran out yesterday. I thought I was going to die out here, but I had to keep going. Too many kids are counting on this letter." Wade lifted Timothy onto his horse and climbed up behind him as they rode back toward his ranch house. Wade's mind raced with the implications of what he'd heard. If Judge Harrison was indeed involved in exploiting orphan children, exposing him would require incredible courage and ironclad evidence. The letter Timothy clutched might contain that evidence, but it would also make them both targets of one of the most dangerous men in the territory. Wade Coleman had lived alone on his ranch for 8 years, ever since his wife Sarah died in childbirth along with their unborn son. He had chosen isolation to escape the pain of loss, but now fate had brought him a child who needed protection. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible Western stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. As they reached Wade's ranch house, Timothy finally allowed himself to relax slightly, though his grip on the mysterious letter never loosened. Wade helped him down from the horse and guided him toward the house, knowing that once they opened that letter, there would be no turning back. Inside the modest ranch house, Wade prepared a simple meal while Timothy washed the dessert dust from his face and hands. The boy ate slowly, his stomach too empty to handle much food at once. But his eyes never left Wade's face. "Mr. Coleman," Timothy said finally, "do you think people will believe what's in Billy's letter? Judge Harrison is real powerful, and lots of folks are scared of him." Wade sat across from the boy at his kitchen table, studying the young face that had seen too much hardship. "Timothy, I've spent most of my adult life avoiding other people's problems. I came out here to this desert to be alone with my grief and my regrets. But sometimes a man gets a chance to do something that matters, something that makes all his pain worthwhile." Timothy's eyes brightened with hope for the first time since Wade had found him. "Does that mean you'll help?" Wade nodded solemnly. "It means we're going to open that letter and see what your friend Billy discovered. And if it's what I think it is, we're going to make sure Judge Harrison pays for every child he's hurt." Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe now to follow this epic Western adventure and discover the shocking secrets hidden in Billy's letter. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, Wade Coleman prepared to break the seal on a letter that would either bring justice to the innocent or destroy them both in the attempt. The lonely rancher's quiet existence was about to end, and the fight for Timothy Walsh's life and the lives of countless other orphan children was about to begin. The oil lamp cast dancing shadows across Wade's kitchen table as he carefully opened Billy's letter. With Timothy sitting beside him, the boy's hands trembled slightly, whether from exhaustion, fear, or anticipation. Wade couldn't tell. The envelope was addressed simply to someone who cares in a child's careful handwriting. Inside were 3 sheets of paper covered in cramped writing, along with what appeared to be official documents that had been torn from a ledger book. As Wade began to read, his face grew darker with each line. Billy Morrison had been more than just another orphan at Riverside Children's Home. He was a boy who could read and write exceptionally well, skills that had made him useful to the orphanage administrators in ways they never intended. They had put him to work copying records and maintaining files, never suspecting that he was secretly documenting the horrors he witnessed. The letter began with Billy's own story. "My name is Billy Morrison, and I am 12 years old. If someone is reading this, it probably means something terrible has happened to me. But I had to write down the truth before it was too late. The children at Riverside aren't being prepared for adoption like everyone thinks. We're being sold like cattle to anyone willing to pay Judge Harrison's price." Wade looked up at Timothy, who was watching his face intently. "Did you know Billy could read and write this well?" "Billy was the smartest kid at the orphanage," Timothy replied proudly. "He taught some of us younger kids our letters when the adults weren't looking. He said education was the only way we'd ever escape." Wade continued reading, and the contents made his stomach turn. Billy had documented a systematic operation where Judge Harrison used his legal authority to declare children wards of the court, and then sold them to mining companies, cattle ranches, and other businesses that needed cheap labor. The children were told they were being apprenticed to learn trades, but the reality was pure slavery. The most damaging evidence came in the form of the torn ledger pages. These showed payments made to Judge Harrison from various business owners, with notations like one boy, age 14, strong build, $75, and to girls, ages 10 and 12, domestic work, $1.50 each. The transactions were recorded with the cold efficiency of livestock sales. But the worst revelation was yet to come. Billy had discovered that children who grew too old or became troublesome weren't just sold to harsh employers, they were being murdered and buried in unmarked graves in the desert. Their disappearances explained away as runaways or placement failures. "Timothy," Wade said carefully, closing the letter temporarily, "Billy writes here about children who disappeared completely. Do you know anything about that?" Timothy's face went pale. "There was a girl named Susan Kelly. She was 15 and kept asking when she'd be allowed to leave the orphanage. One day she just wasn't there anymore. They told us she'd been adopted by a family in California, but Billy found her name in a different kind of book, one that listed her as disposed of permanently. Wade felt rage building in his chest, the same fury he'd felt during his days as a deputy sheriff before he'd retreated to ranch life. But this was different. This wasn't crime born of desperation or passion. This was calculated evil that preyed on society's most vulnerable members. The letter concluded with Billy's desperate plea, "I know they're going to catch me soon. I've been asking too many questions and copying too many records. Judge Harrison is coming to inspect the orphanage next week, and I heard Mrs. Garrett tell the other supervisors that I'm on the list of children to be relocated. If someone finds this letter, please help the other kids. There are still 37 children at Riverside who don't know what's really going to happen to them." Wade set the letter down and looked at Timothy. "When did Billy give you this?" "5 days ago." Timothy replied, "The night before Judge Harrison arrived. Billy woke me up in the middle of the night and told me I had to run. He said I was small and fast, and I might be able to get away if I was careful." "And Billy?" Wade asked. Though he dreaded the answer, Timothy's eyes filled with tears. "They caught him trying to help me escape. The last thing I saw was Judge Harrison's men dragging him toward the punishment building. Billy was screaming for someone to help the other kids." Wade stood up and walked to his window, staring out at the star-filled desert night. In his previous life as a lawman, he had dealt with corruption, but nothing approaching this scale. Judge Harrison wasn't just a crooked official taking bribes. He was running what amounted to a murder operation targeting children. "Mr. Coleman," Timothy said quietly, "do you think Billy's still alive?" Wade turned back to the boy, seeing desperate hope in his young face. "I don't know, son, but I promise you this, we're going to find out, and we're going to make sure every child still trapped in that place gets free." Timothy wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "What do we do first?" Wade began formulating a plan that was either brilliantly simple or completely insane. "First, we're going to make copies of everything in this letter. Then we're going to ride to Tucson and find someone in federal law enforcement who isn't in Judge Harrison's pocket." "But what if there isn't anyone?" Timothy asked. "Billy said the corruption goes everywhere. Then we'll make our own justice." Wade replied grimly, "But before we do anything else, we need more evidence. And that means we're going to have to get closer to Riverside Children's Home than either of us wants to go. Don't miss the next chapter of this epic Western adventure. Subscribe to our channel to follow this dangerous mission and discover whether Wade and Timothy can expose the truth before Judge Harrison silences them forever." As Wade began planning their approach to the orphanage, he knew they were facing the most dangerous adversary of his life. Judge Silas Harrison had the law, the money, and the power to destroy anyone who threatened his operation. But he had never faced a combination like Wade Coleman's determination and Timothy Walsh's courage, fueled by the dying wish of a 12-year-old boy who had sacrificed everything for the truth. The pre-dawn darkness provided perfect cover as Wade and Timothy approached the imposing walls of Riverside Children's Home. From their hiding place behind a cluster of desert rocks, Wade could see armed guards patrolling the perimeter with military precision. This was no ordinary orphanage. It was a prison designed to keep children in and help out. Wade had spent 2 days planning this rescue mission after making copies of Billy's letter and hiding them in multiple locations around his ranch. If something happened to them, at least the evidence would survive to expose Judge Harrison's crimes. But Wade couldn't live with himself if he didn't try to save the 37 children still trapped inside. Timothy, despite Wade's protests, had insisted on coming along. The boy argued that he was the only one who knew the layout of the building and could identify which children were in the most immediate danger. Reluctantly, Wade had agreed, knowing that Timothy's knowledge might be the difference between success and disaster. Through his field glasses, Wade studied the compound's defenses. 2 guards walked regular patrols around the main building, while others were stationed at the front gate and the administrative offices. The children's dormitories were located in the rear of the compound, separated from the main building by a courtyard that offered minimal cover. "There," whispered Timothy, pointing toward a barred window on the 2nd floor of the dormitory building. "That's where they keep the older boys. If Billy's still alive, that's where he'd be." Wade nodded, adjusting his gun belt and checking his ammunition. "Timothy, I want you to stay here until I signal that it's safe. If something goes wrong, you ride back to the ranch and get those copies of the letter to the federal marshal in Tucson. I'm not leaving without Billy and the other kids." Timothy replied firmly, "We came this far together, and I'm not abandoning them now." Wade looked at the determined young face and recognized something of himself in Timothy's stubborn courage. "All right, son, but you do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. No heroics." The plan Wade had devised was dangerous but straightforward. He would create a distraction at the front of the compound by setting fire to the administrative building where Judge Harrison's records were kept. While the guards responded to the fire, Timothy would guide the children out through a weak section of the rear wall that Wade had identified during his reconnaissance. As Wade made his way toward the administrative building, he thought about the letter Billy had written and the courage it must have taken for a 12-year-old boy to document such horrors while knowing the consequences of being caught. That bravery deserved to be honored with action, not just words. The administrative building was easier to enter than Wade had expected. The guards were focused on external threats, not someone brazen enough to walk through the front door. Inside, Wade found filing cabinets full of records that confirmed everything in Billy's letter. He quickly stuffed the most damaging documents into his saddlebags before dousing the remaining files with lamp oil. The fire started small but spread quickly through the dry wooden structure. Within minutes, alarm bells were ringing throughout the compound, and Wade could see guards running toward the burning building. It was time to signal Timothy. Wade fired 3 shots into the air, the agreed-upon signal, then made his way toward the dormitory building. What he found there made his blood boil. The children's quarters were more like prison cells, with multiple kids crammed into spaces barely large enough for one adult. Timothy appeared at his side, leading a group of frightened children toward the breach in the rear wall. But their escape was complicated by the discovery of Billy Morrison, barely alive in a punishment cell beneath the main building. Billy was unconscious and severely beaten, but he was breathing. Wade lifted the boy carefully while Timothy organized the other children into groups. The youngest ones were paired with older kids who could help them run, while those who were injured or too weak were carried by the stronger children. The escape became a race against time as the guards began to realize that the fire was a diversion. Shouts echoed across the compound as armed men spread out to search for intruders. Wade and Timothy led the children through the desert darkness, using every shadow and rock formation to stay hidden. They almost made it to safety when Judge Harrison himself arrived with additional men. The judge's voice boomed across the desert as he organized a systematic search of the area. "Around the orphanage, there," shouted one of the guards, spotting movement near a cluster of cacti where the children were hiding. Wade made a decision that probably saved all their lives. He stepped out into the open, drawing the guards' attention to himself while Timothy led the children toward a predetermined rally point near Wade's ranch. The gunfight that followed was brief but decisive. Wade's years as a lawman served him well as he used the terrain and darkness to his advantage. When the shooting stopped, 3 of Judge Harrison's men were down, and the judge himself was wounded in the shoulder. Wade stood over the fallen judge, his smoking pistol pointed at the corrupt official's head. "Judge Silas Harrison, you're under citizen's arrest for murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit crimes against children. You can't prove anything." Harrison gasped through his pain. "I have friends in every courthouse from here to Washington. They'll never convict me." Wade smiled grimly and pulled out copies of Billy's letter and the documents he had taken from the administrative building. "Maybe not, Judge, but these children are going to testify about what happened here, and the federal government is going to investigate every transaction you ever made." 3 weeks later, the trials began in federal court in Phoenix. Billy Morrison, recovered from his injuries, testified about the systematic abuse and murder of orphan children. Timothy Walsh told his story of escape and rescue, while 37 other children provided corroborating evidence that painted a picture of institutional evil that shocked the entire territory. Subscribe now to our channel for more epic Western stories that celebrate the triumph of good over evil. Judge Harrison was sentenced to life in prison, while his accomplices received lengthy sentences for their roles in the conspiracy. The Riverside Children's Home was permanently closed, and new laws were enacted to protect orphan children throughout Arizona territory. Wade Coleman never returned to his solitary existence. Instead, he established a school and safe haven on his ranch where rescued children could learn and heal. Timothy Walsh became his first adopted son, eventually growing up to become a territorial marshal dedicated to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Billy Morrison, despite his traumatic experiences, became a writer and journalist who exposed corruption wherever he found it. His courage in documenting the truth while risking his own life inspired a generation of reformers who fought for children's rights across the American West. The letter that had started it all was preserved as evidence of how one child's courage could change the world. Wade's ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where justice lived, and where no child would ever again face evil without someone willing to fight for them. This Western story reminds us that true heroism often comes from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important truths.